Now we know in the New American Century, for instance, that was in the 90s, they published on their own site that they wanted to take out a whole bunch of countries, starting with Afghanistan and then Iraq. They talked about Libya and Syria as well, and Iran. And they, of course, followed pretty well the order they went through so far when Mr. Bush was in, and Obama's taken over the exact same schedule. And that's why Rumsfeld thanked him a few weeks ago for not changing the schedule and the countries that would be taken down. And it's astonishing, really, to live through this, watching the blatant plans be made in the 90s. Israel agreed with the exact same planned agenda. They also mentioned Syria too, and now you're finding agitation in Syria. And it's taken years to plan all this from within and to get it all rolling. But it's astonishing, as I say. And General Wesley Clark has given an interview with, I think, Democracy Now! I think that gets funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. But anyway, he does admit in 2007 about the same list and the same agenda, and he's up on YouTube, and I'll put the link up tonight for that, where you'll hear him talking in his own words about this particular agenda, including Syria and Libya and all the rest of it. And that they were simply carrying on, really. And I might try and dig out the New American Century list from the 90s. I think it was 97 was the last one they drew up, to show you that we're living through a big business plan, and all the slaughter that's going on was pre-planned, collateral damage and all that. The fighters on the ground, regardless of sides, are incidental to these boys. They don't really care. They have their eyes set on oil and water. Water's going to be massively expensive when the private corporations take over the water in Libya, for sure, with its underwater springs, aqueducts, massive thing. So that's going to be, again, part of the future. All resources will be taken over by big corporations. Right on track again. And no one really cares as they're watching Japan. So many laws being rammed through. I can't believe just today looking at different laws being rammed through Canada and different countries, all at the same time, right down to local level, while everyone's distracted with what's going on. It's just amazing, truly amazing. And also with the al-Qaeda stuff. I mean, we know darn well, it came out at the time after 9/11, that some experts from the CIA came out and said al-Qaeda really was a rough, it was actually like a code term they used for communicating to each other, all the forces that the CIA had set up to fight the Soviet Union. And it wasn't an organization as such. It was many different groups all involved. And they used al-Qaeda as a sort of a calling signal, I might say, through the various communication devices they had to communicate with each other. And Brzezinski, of course, I might even put that up again too, where you'll see him talking back in the 80s or 70s, I think it was the 80s, where he was talking to Afghanistanis, telling them that to go and fight against the Soviets. It'd be a holy war. He called it a holy jihad in his own words. And he's a geopolitician. They work out the plan like a chessboard, and get country to fight country to take all supposedly their enemies down and clear the way for their big business to follow in and just grab all the resources. And we also find confirmation of this whole al-Qaeda CIA thing. Of course, the CIA did start up so many of the jihadi groups, and they actually Islamized them too, you might say. They had special tracts printed up and kept focusing on them, and teaching groups out there to make them really radical Muslims to fight the Soviets. Well, now you're left with the problem afterwards, but they're still rather radical. And it says here, Libyan rebel commander admits his fighters have al-Qaeda links. So these wonderful freedom fighters that are not insurgents, of course, because the UN wants to protect these guys. Otherwise they call them insurgents. And, they're freedom fighters, you understand. This is an interview with the Italian newspaper Il Sole 24 Mr. al-Hasidi admitted that he had recruited about 25 men from the Derna area in eastern Libya to fight against coalition troops in Iraq. Some of them, he said, are on the front lines in Ajibaya. It says Mr. al-Hasidi insisted his fighters are patriots and good Muslims, not terrorists, but added that the members of al-Qaeda are also good Muslims and are fighting against the invader. So he's a guy who works with the CIA in the past. You'll find out why after I come back from this break. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix and reading an article where a particular Mr. al-Hasidi talks about al-Qaeda working alongside the so-called freedom fighters for Libya, I guess the Muslim Brotherhood and so on, and they're all in it together, but they've got a sort of cordial relationship right now with the Pentagon and the CIA. Just shows it's all farce, isn't it? But it says here that Mr. Hasidi, was a member of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, or LIFG, which killed dozens of Libyan troops in guerrilla attacks around Derna and Benghazi in 1995-96. Even though the LIFG is not part of the al-Qaeda organization, the United States military West Point Academy has said the two share an increasingly cooperative relationship. In 2007, documents captured by Allied forces from the town of Sinjar showed LIFG members made up the second largest cohort of foreign fighters in Iraq after Saudi Arabia. And it says, earlier this month, al-Qaeda issued a call for supporters to back the Libyan rebellion, which is said would lead to the imposition of the stage of Islam in the country. Now, who do you think set up the Islamic Brotherhood organization? A lot of the followers won't know it themselves. And you'll find, of course, it's usual, again, MI6 boys and so on, CIA, who start up these fraternities, promise them the world, use them, and then they do the nasty on them. But those followers always get technically what they deserve. Unfortunately, it's the same all through the system of life. If you don't really know what you're being guided into and who's going to benefit from it and who's really communicating with outside foreigners like CIA, MI6, then you better bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be a dirty deal. Anyway, British Islamists have also backed a rebellion with the former head of the band al-Muhajirun, it says, proclaiming that the call for Islam, the Sharia and Jihad from Libya had shaken the enemies of Islam and the Muslims more than the tsunami that Allah sent against their friends, the Japanese. So it's quite something else. You know, it's so the spook world of spies, is so full of deceit and stings and counter stings and all the rest of it and things going on that you're hard pressed to follow what really is going on. And even when the mainstream media present you with an al-Qaeda front, nasty group and all the rest of it, the very front group that was set up by them in the first place against the Soviets, I don't think they ever really break the bonds at all. And they'll use anybody they can use, and they do love groups, pre-existing groups too, and they certainly do love fraternities. Every nation has its fraternities, all with the same symbology, signals and all the rest of it, and that's quite something. And I remember reading about the British Army going into India, and they were astounded in the 1700s that the travelling Masonic lodges to find out that every major town in India had Masonic lodges there already. They had no clue that this was across the world. And again, that's how people are kept in the dark. Quite something, isn't it?